doing? Hope everybody's feeling blessed. I don't have a whole lot of time. My daughter will be bum rushing me in about 15 minutes because it's going to be lunchtime. This wasn't even what I really wanted to make this video about. And through just some random coincidences, I was kind of inspired to make this video. So the other day, I'm at Barnes & Noble's with my wife, and I wanted to get Ram Dass's Be Here Now, was a book that I've been wanting to read. So I walk over to the section where it would be, and I ended up seeing this book, Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And what was interesting about it is, while all the other books were spine side out and all perfectly lined up on the bookshelf, this was the only one that was facing outwards, just right in my face as soon as I walked up. So I looked through the books, and they didn't have Ram Dass's book. I had them order it for me, and I figured I'd just go ahead and pick this one up since it was damn near jumping off the shelf at me when I walked up. And I was pretty impressed. I haven't finished reading it yet, but it is a very interesting book. And if you're into reading, I highly suggest checking it out because there's a lot of fascinating information. I wanted to discuss real quick, the very beginning of the book, he tells a story about a lady named Anna. Now, Anna had two kids, a 12-year-old son, 11-year-old daughter, and it was a Sunday afternoon. She had just got out of the shower. Her husband had left, and he never said bye to her. Apparently, he gave the kids, hugs and kisses, and told them he loved them, said goodbye, and Anna thought it was strange that he wouldn't tell her where he was going. He didn't just say anything. He just left. So she tried calling him. He's not answering the phone. She started to feel concerned. And a little bit later, there's a knock at the door. It's two policemen. And they asked to come inside. And they sit her down and they talk to her and tell her that, unfortunately, that morning, her husband went up to one of the tallest buildings in the city and he jumped to his death. And so this just sent Anna in a spiral. And, she suffered with dealing with this memory for quite a while. The kids were distraught. She was distraught. And the book goes on to describe some of the scientific things that happen to you internally with a situation like this. Now, let me start by saying, because the human brain is much bigger than I need to get a camera and stop recording off my phone. But because the human brain is much larger than any other animal or species that's out there, we have the ability to imprint memories on our brain and relive them. And what's interesting about it is the way we do it, we can actually relive an event and the body will respond to that event the same way it would the day that it actually happened. And because the suicide of Anna's husband was such an impactful event on her, it kind of burned that feeling and that memory in her mind. So every day as she tried to live with what happened, her body was going through this emotional response where the sympathetic nervous system pretty much takes control and it puts you into a flight or flight situation. And things will happen like your pupils dilate so you can see better. Your heart rate and breathing, your respiratory, everything increases and ramps up. It gets ready to either fight or run. Glucose will dump into your bloodstream to become an immediate source of energy. And that way, your muscles have the blood and the energy it needs to make a snappy decision on whatever, the outcome needs to be. Your immune system will ramp up, and then, but then it also goes down, and then adrenaline and cortisol dumps into the muscles again for a source of energy. Interesting, the blood moves from the front of your brain and will actually all redirect to the back of your brain, because the front of your brain is what processes critical thinking and will help you kind of think through something. But in a fight or flight situation, I don't know if I'm saying that right, fight or flight situation, you don't want to think, you just want to react. So that's why it diverts to the back of your brain. So there is no thought, it's just instinctive movements. All this is good when you're in a fight or flight situation, and your body will start to normalize itself after a couple hours. And the problem with a lot of us, but especially Anna here, was that through the memory of what happened that day, her body reacted the same way as if it did happen right then and there. And her body would go through all of these stressors trying to deal with the stress of this memory. And so this was happening to her up to 100 times a day, they said. And your body's not meant to deal with it that long. It needs to come back down, and it needs to normalize itself. So in her case, there was no normalcy. She was ramped up. She was at 100 all day, every day, reliving this situation. And it wound up taking its toll on her. She started off, she ended up paralyzed. Her body, the stress had shut her body down from the waist down. And she went into the hospital. She was in the hospital for like 2 months. And after some physical therapy, she started to regain some of it, but her left leg was still numb, and she had to use a walker and whatnot. And she started to get really ill. Her body was breaking out in rashes and hives. She ended up getting ulcers in her mouth, which then it was part of like the mucous membrane, in your circulatory system. So it ended up being on her vagina and her anus as well. Just these ulcers, and literally all this derived from the stress of this one event that she couldn't move past. And eventually, after taking tons and tons and tons of medicine, and you know how the medicine goes, there's a place for some of it, but a lot of times some of it has very negative side effects also. So one of her negative side effects was, especially for the mouth ulcers, that it stopped the production of saliva. So then she had an issue there with just her mouth and throat were always dry, and it ended up leading to having esophagus cancer. A tumor formed and it was cancerous, and they wanted to start her on some chemotherapy. And she ended up, at some point, made a conscious decision that she was done with it all. She'd pretty much given up life, and she felt the only way she was going to be able to move forward through all this was with I apologize for that. I have some distractions here today with my daughter being at home and in school, doing the remote learning. But so back to Anna. She makes a conscious decision to stop all of her medicine, to stop the chemotherapy, and she kind of just stopped going to her doctor's appointments. And her family doctor would call in and tell her things, literally was calling her stupid and saying, you have to get back on your medicine, you have to get back into therapy because you're going to die if you don't. And she made a conscious decision not to. She said, no, I'm done with it all, and your way isn't helping, and I'm going to try things my way. So one of her friends winds up telling her that Dr. Joe Dispenza was in town, and he was doing some kind of weekend conference, and she invited her to go. So she went, listened to what he had to say, and was moved enough to start practicing what he was preaching. And eventually, it took a while. It took, I think it was like upwards of 2 years, but she slowly but surely started to heal herself. And today she's alive, she's walking on her 2 feet, and she is cancer free, and all the other elements went away. So it was a very, very interesting story, and kind of goes to show you the power of your mind and what you're capable. It could be used in a very destructive manner, or it could be used in a very positive and healing manner. So I think that's where meditation really plays a huge role for a lot of people. I know people like to look at it, and I did for a long time. It's like, oh, it's a woo-woo, and what, I'm just going to sit still and just focus on me. And I didn't quite understand. I was very ignorant to a lot of it for a long time, but it has helped me. And what I think it does for me personally is it stills my mind in a way where your mind is constantly going, you're constantly thinking of things, and it's hard to turn that off. And for me, a lot of my thoughts were negative, where I would stay up literally 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, have to be up by 5, and I couldn't stop harping on things that I did years ago, sometimes even as far back as like middle school, like junior high school, and 7th and 8th grade, just stupid things that I've done, stupid things that I've said. And I would hold it like a ball of just anxiety in my chest, and I would be laying in bed cringing and my heartbeat elevated and thinking about all the mistakes I did and unable to let those things go. So by practicing some meditation, what I've kind of learned is while I'm meditating and while I'm trying to calm my mind, as these thoughts come in and I observe them, I acknowledge them, I let them drift away. And then a new thought will come in. I'll watch it, I'll observe it, I acknowledge it for what it is, and then I let that go away. And every once in a while, I'll catch a moment where I am thought-free. And that helps me outside of meditation when I'm going about my daily activities. Anytime I start to feel or have bad emotions or memories come in, I can kind of stop what I'm doing, observe it for a second, and then let it go. And it's a progress. Now, I'm still very new to all this, and I don't have all the answers, but these are just the things that I'm going through, and I'm trying to possibly relate to a few people who might be starting as well. But yeah, holding negative energy in can literally kill you. You always heard, at least I always heard that, stress will kill you, stress will kill you. It's bad for your heart, it's bad for this and that. And I didn't know the science behind it, but I'm just like, yeah, well, life is stressful, so what are you going to do? You got to deal with it, right? But no, there are different ways to deal with it. And it's not good to let those things, those feelings, those emotions take control of you every day, all day. Because they will turn you into a prisoner in your own mind. I wanted to end this by telling you a story that I really enjoyed. It's a Buddhist story of two Buddhist monks traveling to a Buddhist temple. And it's a far walk that they have to go. So there's a junior monk and a senior monk. And the junior monk obviously is learning under the senior monk. And they approach a spot where there's a creek moving pretty quickly, and down the creek a little bit there's this little old lady, and she's trying to cross the creek, but she's unsure of her footing. She's afraid that the current's too strong and it's going to sweep her legs and she's going to be carried down the creek. So she sees the two monks approach, and she asks if one of them can give her a hand to get to the other end. This phone, I apologize, it's not wanting to cooperate today, but that's okay, we're going to get through this. So the little old lady sees the monks approach, and she asks for help to get to the other side. She's worried that she's going to slip and fall. So without hesitation, the senior monk walks over, he picks her up and carries her to the other side and sets her down. And the junior monk is watching, kind of confused, because in their religion, they're not supposed to touch women. It's a sinful act to lay their hands on a woman. And he's kind of unsure, well, why would he do that? He's supposed to be setting a good example for me, but yet here he is going against what we're being taught. So they continue their walk to the temple, and the whole time the junior monk is tossing this around in his head, and he's wanting to say something, but he's not. And some time goes by, and finally he speaks up and says, why did you do that? Why did you pick that lady up? That's a sinful act. We're not supposed to touch women. Why would you do that? And the senior monk calmly stops and looks at him and says, oh, that lady, I set her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her? So with that being said, let these things go. Practice your meditation and stay blessed. I love you all. Be safe.